Star vs. the Forces of Evil is a show that I'm very conflicted on. It has a lot of good things going for it. The art direction and character design are really charming and detailed, the music literally hits all the right notes and does a terrific job setting whatever tone a scene is going for, and the world of the series has some very interesting and mysterious lore and culture. But with all that said, I don't really like it.
To the dislike button.
Away!
Nick Tando.
Alright, so this video has been a long time coming. Star vs. was the first thing that I ever reviewed for this channel, and obviously that video is pretty outdated now. Most of my earliest videos are. I wanted to take another look at this show for a year or so, and now that Season 3 has wrapped up and I've given Seasons 1 and 2 another watch, I think that it's about time that I re-review this show. I've always thought that this series was kind of overrated, but I've never been quite sure why. I know that any cartoon with some semblance of lore is an instant success nowadays, which is kind of infuriating when it's led to so many other simpler shows getting lost in the dust, but with Star I really don't get it. I've never been able to get into the show. I've given it shot after shot after shot for the past 3 years, and hardly anything about it has clicked with me. I know that this is a rather unpopular opinion, but it's one that's been simmering in my mind for over a year, and I simply want to share it. This video is by no means an attack on any fan of the show, or anyone who was or is involved with creating it. I'm just not a big fan of Star vs. the Forces of Evil, and allow me to explain why. With most of the cast of Star vs., I feel nothing. The show is character-driven for the most part, yet I find none of the characters to be all that interesting. These aren't characters that make any situation that they're put into entertaining. Honestly, my least favorite episodes of the series are the ones where the characters just kind of meander around their world. Good thing there's more than one of those. The show's world is far more interesting than our main characters, so I tend to favor the characters that are closer to that world, as most of those actually have depth. Whatever character's at the center of an episode tends to be a good indicator of its quality. For instance, I really like characters like Queen Moon, Buff Frog, Eclipsa, and Ms. Heinous. They're characters that you learn a little more about whenever you see them, and aren't labeled by a simple trope like many of the other characters are. For that reason, episodes like Moon the Undaunted, On the Job, and Total Eclipse of the Moon are among my favorites the show has done. Then there's the characters that I'm indifferent to, which are typically the focus of episodes that are just alright. The Royal High Commission have cool designs, but have little depth or little to do in Season 3. Marco's parents and King River are rarely anything more than gag machines. I just don't find Ludo to be all that funny, no matter how sane he is, and while Tom has become less one-note over time, and I like the direction they took him in with Season 3, but I hate the reason why he's become such a big character on the show now. But I'll save that for later. When the show focuses on characters that I dislike, it can have some major duds. The comedy in this show really falls flat for me. I've chuckled a few times, but many of the gags feel very drawn out and tend to be random for the sake of being random. In another show that uses that type of humor more sparingly, those random jokes might be more charming. But here it's overused to the point where it's annoying. Because the humor doesn't work for me, characters that involve a lot of comedy in how they're written come off as super annoying to me. Examples of that are basically every other important minor or one-off character that has one joke that they just repeat over and over again. Like repeating the joke about Princess Smooshy taking a selfie and uttering "camera phone." Oh god, that hurt my voice saying it. In a obnoxious accent does not make the joke funny. Selfie jokes are never funny. That's like an unspoken rule of comedy. Glossrick and Ponyhead in particular are characters that appear in episodes frequently, and whenever they tie one of these two in with the episode's stakes, I could not care less. Ponyhead just has an incredibly irritating accent, and she's just plain selfish, hardly ever sincerely apologizing or thanking Star whenever she acts as a good friend to her. I find nothing she says to be remotely funny, and I'm honestly surprised that she's such a major character in the series. I really hope I'm not the only one out there who finds her annoying. Glossrick is a twist on the trope of the wise old hermit whose strange lessons end up helping their apprentice. But with Glossrick, all he does is give minimal advice and instead acts selfishly at times when Star needs him. I know that the persona he puts on is all part of the plan, so to speak, but it feels like his actions cause more stress and issues for Star and Marco than needed. I get it, that's the joke with him, but I don't find it funny. During the arc in Season 2 when he was kidnapped by Ludo, I didn't care. I didn't care because he didn't care. It was obvious that everything was going to turn out alright for him. Even in Season 3, I saw his resurrection coming from the moment he supposedly passed away. There's never any stakes with this character, and the show never once tricked me into thinking that there were, making him seem like a pretty pointless character, especially when he's supposedly dead or in danger for almost half of the series run. Honestly, I agree with what King Rivers said about Glossaryck after he learned that Ludo had kidnapped him.
Oh, he's gone. Good riddance, I say.
As for our protagonists, Star and Marco feel kind of basic. They become more enjoyable to watch over time, like Star was pretty obnoxious and hardly ever learned her lesson in Season 1 and early Season 2, but personally I found both of them to be rather basic. I don't really find them boring, it's just that out of everything that happens on the show, these two tend to be some of the least interesting parts of it. I know that this duo has gone under a lot of development, but a few times I've noticed the show missing opportunities for it.
But enough with this manual labor. It's magic time.
Star, isn't that what got you into this mess in the first place?
No, Marco. That was the rainbow glitter unicorn gnome hat kitty bacon Hawaiian nightmare spell.
The episode Running with Scissors is the biggest offender in that field. Marco goes on a journey that causes him to age 16 years in another dimension, and once his journey is complete, he reverts back to his former self. At the end of the episode, he has this great moment of self-reflection, seeing that while he's changed so much, the world around him has stayed pretty much the same, and it's great. But this episode is pointless. Despite now having the mind of an adult, Marco acts exactly the same as he did prior to this episode. This would have been an easy opportunity for them to flesh out Marco's character, but to me it was nothing more than a disappointing tease. I know that a lot of characters on this show are built to be relatable, the human characters especially, but they tend to sacrifice having an interesting character for a relatable character. I feel that Steven Universe tends to handle a few of these character concepts a lot better. For example, I feel like Steven's personality and motivations are more closely linked with his backstory and the lore of the show, unlike Star and Marco, who typically just act the way they do because it's part of their characters, which makes everything they do significantly less interesting. Steven Universe's supporting cast also gets a lot of flack, and I can see someone caring for them to the degree that I care about Star's supporting cast. But I personally find all of the citizens in Beach City to be really enjoyable to watch. Well, almost all of them. They're all relatable, but they all have their own flaws and problems that they have to deal with. It helps that Steven Universe actually gave its side characters a chance to be developed, instead of increasingly throwing them out the window. You know that one shot in the Simpsons intro where it whooshes by all the characters, and you think to yourself, wow, this show has so many characters. Starverse kind of tries to do the same thing for its intro, but it's just sad to look at now. Let me put this into perspective. Here's all the characters that play a role in Season 1. Now here's Season 2. And Season 3. By Season 5, I bet the only character we're going to focus on is the top half of Star. Not even the entirety of Star herself, just her top half. Look, I know that no one was really sad to see characters like Frances Smithington practically disappear after Season 1, but that's because the show never gave any of these characters a chance to be developed. I don't even know who this character's name is, and she's in the Season 1 intro. I kind of understand why a lot of these characters got left in the dust. The stakes of the show got higher, and there were more important stories to be told. Like even formerly important characters like Marco's parents and Jackie have started to fall by the wayside, right even when one of them was starting to become an actual character. I feel like if the show didn't tighten its focus so much over time, its cast would be more fondly remembered. I don't even feel like the show completely justified these decisions either. The show has never properly built up to the amount of status quo changes that it's gotten, which brings me to my next point. If you take a look at the bigger picture that Starverse has created over the course of its run, you can tell that the show that it was intended to be is very different from the show that it's become. This is the nitpickiest of all nitpicks, but I think that the title of the series seems a little inaccurate now. Star doesn't really fight evil that often. Typically, she just hangs out and conquers any situation that comes her way. Yeah, I know that description's more than a little too long for a title, but I think it may show that the series wasn't meant to go into a very plot-heavy direction, and was instead intended to be much more formulaic, like the early episodes were. I might be reading a little too much into a title, but you can see this in how poorly paced and disjointed the plot of the series can be. The main story kicks off in episode 8B, where this sinister lizard named Toffee shows up and hijacks the show. I really like him as a character, as well as the little series of episodes where he slowly takes over Ludo's gang and turns them against him, but his introduction comes way too soon. We've barely gotten to know our main characters, and now they're being thrown into a situation of life or death. There's hardly any time for the characters to grow on me before the show starts going, and I think that might be yet another reason why, after Season 3, they still haven't completely clicked with me. After Season 1 ends, you might think that this is where the show really starts, and that it's just gonna get better and more plot-driven from here. But Season 2 drops the ball for most of its run. Between these two seasons, it feels like nothing has changed, except for the aforementioned tighter focus on characters and more mundane plots. Season 1 wasn't perfect, but nearly all of its episodes featured an exciting new dimension or concept. Even if I wasn't in love with how they were executed, I could still admire the show for its creativity. But I have no idea what happened with Season 2. There's still episodes here and there with grand premises, but so much of the season revolves around cool ideas with mundane executions or throwaway episodes plain and simple. Then there's just general laziness, like having 2 episodes where we see the inside of Star's wand, and it looks entirely different each time. The season goofs around for 75% of its episodes before we really get into the plot set up at the end of Season 1. I know that Star Vs is mainly a comedy, but you cannot have an episode where one of the main characters almost dies and directly follow it up with that same character getting locked in the closet. I couldn't even tell you what they were trying to do with Star's wand, something that drove a lot of the season's conflict. It only seemed to not work properly when the plot of an episode needed it to, and that makes the high stakes of the ending to Season 1 seem even more insignificant. Then there's probably my least favorite aspect of the show, the shipping. I'm not talking about what fans have done, I'm talking about how the show constantly pushes its love triangle, even to the point where at one time it was basically the main focus of the show. I can hardly stand most drawn-out relationship drama in animation, especially here where it doesn't know how incredibly predictable it is. I'm like 95% sure that Star and Marco are going to end up together. The show has hinted at it over and over again, and the fact that they're the series' main pairing is the biggest giveaway. I already don't care who the characters end up with, but the fact that they devote so much time to a storyline with such a predictable conclusion is just dumb. They won't let this love triangle thing go, and I'd say that it's probably the weakest part of the show by far. But hey, at least the animation on the show is pretty good. I couldn't possibly have nearly enough problems with it for me to make a segment on it, right? This part of the video is going to be short, because as far as modern cartoons go, Star vs. the Forces of Evil looks pretty great, but I know that it could look better. With the art style, I have no issues. The characters and backgrounds are nothing spectacular, but they're all well designed and drawn. Truthfully, sometimes the way the show looks is far more interesting than the show itself. Design-wise, things have just gotten better over time, but honestly the animation, and by that I mean the way everything moves, peaked early on in Season 1 in my opinion. Mercury Filmworks was the company that animated the first 5 episodes of the series, and I love what they brought to the show. Every movement was bouncy and every expression was exaggerated. Some top-notch flash animation was on display here. They brought such a great energy to the show, and that especially helped with the heavy amount of fight scenes the series had. Combine that with the high-energy chiptune beats that these early episodes were filled with, and you have one heck of an appealing cartoon. Part of me wishes the show kept some part of this style, but it's done alright without it. However, when it comes to most of the Disney shows that it's had a hand in, Mercury Filmworks usually only animates a show for a season or 2 before other studios have to swoop in and complete it. Toon City animated the last 8 episodes of Season 1, and Sugar Cube and Rough Draft Korea have alternated animating the remainder of the series. All of the studios have their minor differences, like Toon City kept some of Mercury's inconsistencies with the line width, and Sugar Cube animates the show in either Flash or Toon Boom using digital puppets, while Rough Draft does the show hand-drawn. If you want a deeper comparison of the different animation styles, I've linked a breakdown my friend Ostrich Vox sent me. I'm just scratching the surface here. Of the 3 studios that came after Mercury Filmworks, I find all of them to be a step down in some way, despite each of them being objectively solid. Mercury stuff is a little rough around the edges, but I think that's what I love about it, and I think that the show got a little too tightly animated when it received a higher budget later on. To give you a decent idea of how the show's animation has evolved over time, let's compare the Season 1 intro with the Season 3 intro. Now, the Season 1 intro has all these great transitions and little character quirks, and moves at a breakneck pace that fits the theme song that accompanies it. The Season 3 intro tries to replicate the greatness of the previous one, and it kind of fails. It's got more characters and references to prior episodes, but the movement is so automated and slow. The first few seconds has this lazy fade transition, Star holds the same expression for a quarter of the runtime, and they copy and paste a few animation cycles from the old intro. I've said this before, but the intro of a cartoon is it putting its best foot forward and trying to make a good first impression. While I can say that a lot of animation in Seasons 2 and 3 is far better than this, getting some of the show's laziest animation in an intro is not acceptable. This is one of the few things that got worse for Season 3. As for everything else in that season, so while I'm not much of a fan of either Seasons 1 or 2, Season 3 ain't too shabby. The pacing of it is very good. There's barely any filler episodes, and the shift to a more dramatic tone is pulled off decently well, though the comedy can still be very intrusive at times. The new outro is great. I love how much influence it takes from anime, and it almost makes up for how lacking the new intro is. I'm not super fond of the fact that the show has completely abandoned its original concept. Really, that's not a good sign for any show, but the show is now more interesting than ever, if still fairly flawed. As for the rest of the season, the battle immunity was fine, though it was kind of underwhelming and overblown, and ended with what was honestly a big deus ex machina. Later on, the way Marker decided to move to Muni and become Starsquire was kind of forced, and it wasn't really given the amount of importance that such a big change like that required. The major story arc of the season about Star trying to unite the monsters and humans of Muni together was also left unresolved, but it kinda bugs me that a plot that was introduced in the season and ate up so many of its episodes was left unresolved for now. I can't say much more about Season 3 besides the fact that I thought it was good. I like the direction that the show is going, but I still can't really get into it. I can't get into the characters, I can't get into the shipping, I can't get into its constant changes, I can't get into Star vs the Forces of Evil. It's just not for me. If you can look past all the negatives that I pointed out in this video and like or even love the show, then more power to you. I just don't care for it that much, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I've basically given up on trying to become a fan of this show, just like how I've given up on trying to have a social life to make videos about cartoons. I'm Nintendo, and thank you for watching. I'm sorry that this video was kind of depressing, but hey, now you feel the way that I do after making this video.
Hi, Jackie.